to the Aquarius Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Reed. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Aquarium Co-Op, the finest retailer of all your vital aquarium needs. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast for a good number of episodes, you will know that I have a passion for breeding fish. And while my interest in the fish I'm working with can change, one thing doesn't. And that thing is that hatching and feeding out baby brine shrimp is a cornerstone of productive breeding and efficiently raising up fry. And for this, I now trust only one baby brine shrimp, Aquarium Co-op's Brine Shrimp Eggs. These eggs have a phenomenal 90% hatch rate, and what is even more important to me, the best egg separation on the market. What do I mean by separation? Well, with the other eggs on the market, regardless of how you harvest the brine shrimp, you are going to get an undesirable amount of eggshells in with your sweet, sweet baby brine shrimp. For me, this was super frustrating and really made me not want to hatch out baby brine shrimp. The Aquarium Co-op eggs must be sprinkled with some sort of crazy Artemida magic because almost all the eggs float to the top of the hatching container once the water settles. This makes for the cleanest gravity-based harvesting from a downspout or airline tubing that I have ever seen. Your baby brine shrimp harvest will be darn near pure gold of baby brine shrimp. No need to try multiple methods of further fry and egg separation. So head on over to aquariumcoop.com and pick up some of these amazing brine shrimp eggs for yourself and see this magic firsthand. Now, on to the interview. Today's date is Friday, December 11th, 2020. My guest today is Andres Ryan. Andres is the owner of Bioaquatics Fish Farm in Sarasota, Florida. He's earned a Bachelor's of Science degree in Biology from Bishop's University in Canada and a Master's degree in Marine Science from Florida Tech. Andres has over 30 years of experience and success breeding a wide variety of fish like clown loaches, Synodontis catfish, Rift Lake cichlids, many tetras and rasboras, and Central American cichlids. So Andres, welcome to the podcast.
Well, welcome to have me.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for making time. I mean, you are an incredibly busy person with all of the projects and the fish farm that you've got going on. I think we already got about 15 minutes. I think we got 15 minutes of interview already done in like the pre-interview section, so I had to make sure I hit the record button so we could actually get it out to the people. But
yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Thank you, Andres. So. I guess we'll just start off with 30 years of experience with an academic background with 2 degrees in biology and in the marine sciences. Where does it all start for you? What are your earliest memories that kind of led you down this path to the point where you are breeding fish that are thought to be basically unbreedable in captivity?
Well, I always, as a kid, we didn't have much TV and was pretty much spending a lot of time outside. And, in our backyard, we had little streams and, down the street, in a little forest, we had a bunch of streams. And I used to go out there collecting all the time and put stuff in fish tanks and, collecting everything from snakes to little toads and a lot of the fish that were in the ditches or the little canals and stuff in Canada was a lot of minnows and some catfish, but also we had a lot of sticklebacks. So I played a lot with those, the sticklebacks and the five spines, 7 spines, and 3 spines. 3 spines are mostly brackish, but that's where I started trying to. And I was very curious about the behavior of those little fish, and they put them in a tank and keep them outside because they like that cold water, and then in tanks in the garage and things like that. And I kind of enjoyed, seeing their behavior, and then every time, some other fish to play with, from bass to even trout, and started that way, And I just kept going on that, and then I still did a lot of other stuff, but mostly, the stuff came from being outside and sticking your net into a puddle of water. That's where it really started.
When did you start, kind of getting into the tropical side of things?
Probably, I'd say, still in Canada. I was go to the stores. There was one little store, a fish store, and he would get in fish maybe once every month, and then he would load up and he'd sell hamsters and rabbits and that kind of stuff. But he'd have that little fish section, and then he wasn't able to get a lot of fish, but once in a while he'd get an order in, fill up the tanks, and then we would show up, and then we'd start looking at all these different fish that come in from the Amazon or wherever else they came from. And that's when I really got into more of the tropical fish, more colorful tetras and angelfish and some weird catfish from South America and stuff like that. I was probably, I'd say, 14 then.
Okay.
12, 14. But I started really going to the canal at 7, I'd say.
Oh wow! Did you have, like, other than observing behavior, like when you'd put them in your home aquaria, do you remember any successes, like, spawning any of these native fish in your in kind of
Yeah.
captive? Oh wow, what?
Oh, yeah.
How did that
Well,
work out?
the sticklebacks were one of them. I was able to breed those, and I never understood why the pairs would die after that. The female would die, and then the male would guard the nest, and then as soon as the babies would hatch and go, the male would slowly wither away. And it's just the way the cycle of life was. The sticklebacks, they just die after they breed.
So they're kind
And
of like yeah, they're kind of like the like salmons then, I guess, in that sense. Like they spawn and
right,
then
right.
they
Some
okay.
of them didn't. Some of them didn't die, like some of the freshwater. But I played a lot with the saltwater one or the brackish water one, the
Huh.
one with the blue body and the red cheeks and the red
Mm-hmm.
body. Those were really nice. And but they're cold water fish, right? I had
Mm-hmm.
those outside at like 3 degrees, and really because as soon as I put them inside, it's too hot.
And
So
and apologies for not remembering, but you grew up in Quebec, right?
yes,
Okay, so let me I got to do this the Google map so I can see Quebec relative to. Oh yeah, yeah. There's there you definitely have a good amount of salt water kind of just surrounding. Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Because you've got the
saltwater,
inlet. Yeah, you've got the inlet coming in the bay.
yeah,
Gosh,
saltwater and freshwater.
St. Lawrence River. Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
All right. No, that's very very cool. And then so with the young, would you try to raise those up, or would you
Oh
release
yeah,
them
I raised
back?
them up and I tried to sell them in the stores, but wasn't really
How did
wasn't really working out.
how many times did you try to sell them in the store before you gave that up?
Oh, hundreds of times maybe. I don't know.
Oh,
I could
would
try.
they bite? Would they bite? Would they actually? Would the
Well,
owners?
they would use them as feeders most of the time,
Oh, okay, okay,
because it was not really fish that people would want to deal because they get a little mean, a little aggressive.
okay.
But that's really how it started. And then I, when I moved down to Florida for my master's, then I started getting intrigued in all these farms because I never realized there was a lot of tropical farm here. And then I started right off the bat, went to stores, and then I'd get told the stores would tell me, "Oh yeah, we get these fish locally." And I'm like, "Oh really? They raise this stuff here?" And then I go to these farms, and they'd be raising a lot of Africans at the time. That's when I was in Florida Tech in Melbourne. There was a lot of in the south in Fellsmere. There was a lot of African cichlid farms. But pretty much the main ones that started the industry, probably in the 50s and 60s, were all
Mm-hmm.
there. Most of those farms are done now; they're gone. But some of the original guy importing all these, Kenny Eyes, the original, Aradas and Sakalafi. Those were the guys that started producing those things, literally 60 years ago. And so I worked for some of these guys, and it was very interesting because it was very simple. Just get the fish, make sure it's healthy, throw it in the pond, and let it go, and hope that they breed.
Mm-hmm.
That was the way. And then I started getting into Tanganyikans after that because they didn't do well in the ponds.
Mm-hmm.
And we do those in tanks, and then I got into breeding
Mm-hmm.
frontosas, things like that.
I'm curious. So, from your academic background, you're a kid. You're 7 years old. You're in canals. You're 14. You're starting to get into tropical fish. So, kind of progressing through, elementary school, high school, and then into college. Was your academic experience, really? Did you know what you wanted to get into, or you just knew you were interested
Oh,
in life and in
the,
marine life or fish
big,
life?
big, yeah, the big guy at the time for us was Cousteau, if you remember that.
Mm,
He had his shows on TV, and he was traveling the world with his Calypso boat and all that stuff. And that's pretty much what I was interested in, exploring the world, not necessarily trying to make a business or anything like that. And I kind of just kept going, and I was interested in just seeing the world, right? Seeing what's going on with nature and what kind of animals out there. And so when I decided I wanted a really big change, I could have stayed in Montreal or Quebec or maybe Maine or a little colder weather, but I decided to just take a jump and just say, okay, I'm going to take off and I'm going to go down to Florida Tech and do my master's there in the tropical. And I knew nothing about this area. Florida to me was basically retired people, Disneyland, and beaches. Like
that's
a
awesome.
lot of
And
that's all I knew.
and gators and
You know,
hurricanes.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that, but those are the three things. It was Disney, oranges, retired people, and beaches. So I didn't really know what I was getting into. I just thought, well, it's going to be warmer. Let's check it out. And it's when I discovered that there's a lot more to Florida than just retirement,
What
right?
did your family think of this?
Well, no, they were glad for me to get out and do
Mm,
something. They're glad for me to got in the master program for aquaculture, and I just did what I could to learn stuff. But I got scattered around in a lot of different projects and worked on
Hmm.
different farms. And then I worked for the fisheries, and I worked on aquaculture for clams and oysters. And so I was all over the place, you know.
Oh wow, that's so your actual master's program was a good portion of it, if not all of it, was aquaculturing.
Yeah.
Oh, that is awesome. I mean, I mean, to kind of dig back into your memories, were there any really memorable projects that you worked on?
Well, there's a lot, but the ones my master's was done on clams. So I did my breeding clams, growing clams, selective breeding, that kind of stuff is what I worked on when I did my master's. Try to do aquaculture, raise those things. They were doing it then, but I was just kind of trying to tweak out the systems. And then at the same time, I needed a bit of money, so I started working at the stores, pet stores, and then I got drifted into the farms, and I still did the masters, and then I worked on a lot of stuff. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to explain I mean, everything from studying manatees to dolphins to sea turtle, hatching and all that stuff. I mean, I did all of that, as I worked, and I'd help other students and other peers to work on their projects, because I was interested in everything.
Wow. So you're right now as an interviewer, you're making me feel like a kid in the candy store as far as like all the different things you've just said and like all the different paths we can go down. I do want to circle back to clams, right? So if kind of I think master's is a thesis. So
Right.
your thesis work on breeding clams, can you kind of dive into that just a little bit for like a layperson to know, like, hey, when you get down on some clams at a restaurant, assuming when restaurants open back up for everybody, this is kind of like what it takes to breed a clam, and then maybe a little bit on the selective, kind of the selectivity, the selective process that maybe you tried to introduce.
Yeah, well, a lot of it is any kind of breeding. If you want to be a producer, you have to have good genetic stock, right? And a lot of times, as a breeder, any breeders, you end up stealing stock from some other farm, right? But it doesn't mean it's going to work better for you. It's just you're inheriting issues or selective breeding from that farm. You're not creating your own. And as if you're in the hobby of any kind, you can tell a guy how to breed a fish, and you've done it 1,000 times, and he can't do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it has nothing to do with your knowledge. It has to do with his parameters are a little different. His feeding schedule is different. His lighting is different. Who knows, right? The gravel he's got in the tank is different color. There's many issues. So in order to be a good breeder, you have to create your own stock. So what I was working on is basically, let's say a guy has got a specific plot where he's trying to raise his clams, because clams have to be done. It's called ocean ranching. So you
Mm-hmm.
go outside and you use a piece of land to, you rent it from the state or whatever, and then you kind of manage it, and this is where you lay up your crop. Well, what would happen is that a lot of the crop would be coming in from another state, another coast area, or let's say Cedar Key, and you're trying to raise that clam into Indian River. Things weren't working really well, and so we ended up having to look around for parameters to look and see, this is what your environment is. This is the type of algae they're going to eat the most. So where are you going to find stock that's going to complement that? So that's what we were working on.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'd have to go out there, collect different clams, and see how they grow. And it was long, because you'd have to measure a lot of the stuff, and these things grow foreverly slow. So a lot of measuring and a lot of waiting, and and then checking the meat and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff genetically that we were looking at.
Mm-hmm. When, when
And
when you made the comment that you're inherently like, as a if you've got a clam kind of operation going, the idea that you're stealing from another farm, is that because
well,
I'm going to use the wrong term here, but like the gametes from the other clams are just in the water and they're going to end up in your clams and they may reproduce?
no, but
Is that?
a lot of breeding clams is done on breeding tables. You control everything.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, you set up the clam on the table. You change the temperature. They spawn. You collect the eggs. You let them settle. They hatch, or whatever they hatch. They settle the bottom, turns into clam, and then you have to grow your seeds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, but the stock is not breeding outside. You breed that inside in a closed system.
Oh, okay.
So you're collecting everything, and you can produce millions and millions and millions of clams. And then, as they grow, you grade them. Because you can grade them. Like in a screen, and so you can get the size you want. You can decide that these are going to be faster growers, these are going to be slow growers, and these are no good. They're going to take forever to go anywhere. So, like I say, there's a lot of work to be done. But like anything else, when you get into this level, it's very difficult for a lot of these guys that do business to understand the process of trying to be a little bit more efficient and to produce a better quality product and and not just wait and see what happens. So it's like that for anything else. I'm very patient. I work on projects and like this year, the last few years, I'm working a little bit more at angelfish because I find that the quality of angelfish out there is not that great. And I think that crossing back angelfish with wild stock and trying to reselect the stuff takes a long time. I mean, I need to work on a black will take me almost 3 years, right? And it's not like I just got blacks from some guy and then I'm going to breed them again and maybe I'll get blacks from another guy and cross them over. And no, you intend to inherit problems, and who knows your genetics, and you don't. So it's nice to start with a clean slate, and that's what I like to do. I'm not really a big fan of getting some fish from some guy and say, okay, breed those and do it. So that's why I like the wild fish a lot, because they, then you can get stock and get, good work on it. But one of the things I will tell anybody is that if you get wild fish, the best breeding fish you will get out of the wild gene pool is your F3s. So your F3s will be much more adaptable to your food, disease resistance in your system, quality of hatches, growth rates. So all that stuff is going to be optimized in the F3s. F3s is the stock that you really want to use to breed in your water.
And F3 is okay. Now help me out here. So that's going to be the third batch, the third generation away from the parents, or the third batch that the wilds produce. Okay, third away from the wild.
Wild would be called F0.
Okay, and then F1 is F1 is that first batch, and then when those guys breed, that's F2, and when those guys breed, that's F3.
Right.
Gotcha.
So if you select breeding on those and you pick the best, your F3s were going to be your optimum breeders for production, for health, whatever else you want to work. But those are the parameters that I work on. And a lot of people don't understand why I keep breeding these fish. And I'm like, well, I'm not there yet. I'm not there where the quality I want to get the quality of the fish.
Is that now arising? And I'm so sorry. Like with the Facebook Messenger voice that we're using, it makes it so prone to interrupting. So I apologize, Andres, for that. And then also I do get impatient with my questions. So I'm sorry for interrupting you. But how did you come to the conclusion that F3 is that like your academic experience plus your practical experience, or is this something you've just developed?
Mostly practical.
Okay.
Because you got to realize you're selectively breeding, right? So you pick the best, right? So the F1s, you're going to get them in and you're going to pick the one to grow the fastest. And then you're going to do it again and again. But as the genetics goes up and then you're progressing into your genetic gene pool, those genes get selective on your parameters that you're growing the stuff up, right? And so, of course, F1s are going to do great, F2s are going to be great, but if you really want to optimize, you got to get to the F3 level, And after that, if you want to be crazy, then you start, really work on trying to go with the albinos and all the melanistic colors and, trying to get different patterns. And so that goes down to past the F3s, F4s, F5s, and then you're going to, start to get, those genes out. They're all those genes are there, but they're just so recessive that it doesn't take much for them to be muffled. So you have to go out, and then when you get this albino or when melanistic strain, you want to cross it back to a wild type or whatever to get the strength back up. And then you cross it back over to get a nice healthy albino. The problem with a lot of the albinos that people are breeding is they're not crossing it back and do the work. And so you'll produce a lot of albinos, but they're not going to be great. They're going to be a lot of deformities. They're not going to grow well. They're going to be tiny, all that kind of stuff. So, but then if you cross it back, you can get a really strong albino because it's got good genetic into it, So it's a work. It's a lifetime project.
Yeah, for sure. Well, just trying to do some quick math here with my experience with angelfish. if somebody wanted to, let's say you got yourself a set of wild angelfish, and you wanted to hit that F3 mark, you're at like a bare minimum. Like maybe if everything aligns, what, 18 months at a bare minimum to get to F3 to where those guys are breeding?
No, I'm probably more
More?
like, well, I know, because you're looking at 6 months.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like
Yeah, okay, yeah. If you're pushing it and you're really
exactly, pushing it.
pushing it, yeah, but most of the time you'll do that stuff in probably 2 years to 3 years.
Yeah,
That's
so
if you're
so somebody listening to this that's like, "Oh man, I'm really intrigued by what Andres is saying. That sounds cool. Maybe I want to try it." Like, if you're in like 2 years, 2 years minimum to like kind of get to that point where you're starting to get that F3 level. So patience, 100%, absolutely. Like just that initial commitment to what you want to do in that project, and the fact that you do this stuff with many species really speaks to your commitment and patience for sure.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing
I love
because
that term, by the way. That's
because
one of my
it's
favorite.
you get caught up in the moment and you're like, oh great, I'm doing this, and you're like, no, I'm not totally there yet. But you if you really want to be good and you really want to come up with a healthy fish or a healthy product or something that's your own, it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time. I always remember it was years ago when I went some clubs. There was this old timer. It was in a club and passed away a long time ago. But he was able to raise a convict. I've never seen him before, but it was a regular pink convict, and he was able to turn that pink convict into, the with the red on him.
Uh huh.
It had red stripes. It looked like a red zebra. You
Wow.
know, and it said it took him 10 years.
Jeez.
And for 10 years he kept plugging away to make sure that all the stripes were red on males and females, and I've never seen that again. Those stocks went away, but I mean it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
But next thing you know, every time he's in the club he pulled these things out and people go, holy shit, where'd you get that? And I made it.
Yeah.
So
That's a
we don't see that a lot anymore.
that's
We
a
don't
rare
see,
breed. Yeah. That's a rare breed of person.
yeah, and it's a convict, right? It's just a
Mm-hmm.
little pink convict that and so a lot of these things are not there anymore. A lot of the hobby now is mostly based. Oh, look what I did, or look at this fish, or look at the new collecting station, or the collecting locale, or yeah, it's all great, but like for me, for example, if I look at the loaches, right? I started. I see loaches are born, for example, at the age of let's say 3 days after hatch. They have 5 stripes. They
Mm-hmm.
have 5 little stripes on their body, and then you're looking at a fish that's 3 millimeters long, right? That's 2 millimeters, yeah. So, and then those stripes goes away, and then it goes down to 4, it goes down to 3, and then that's it, right? So, but a lot of times when you breed them like this, you come up with different patterns, right? You get some with 2 stripes at the end, you get some with 5 stripes, you get some with broken stripes, and I started realizing that there's a big market for those, the oddball patterns,
Mm-hmm.
And then at one point, I'll probably head an albino, and next thing you know, you get an albino, and then you're going to get a melanistic, and you're going to get this, and it's endless what you can do with the fish,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's what the neat part is. That's what to me is interesting, to make it your own.
Mm.
Not just say I bred black angels. Well, that's great, it's just that's what intrigues me.
Mm.
What's going to be next? What's going to be next? What's the next fish on the thing? And I know that there's melanistics and albino loaches. They find them in the wild. We don't see them here because the Asian market will take those and sells them for 4 or 5 figures.
Wow.
So, they're available. They're there, but you're not going to see them here because people aren't going to spend the
Mm-hmm.
money. I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing this for the intrigue of coming up with something different.
Mm-hmm. What is your process to document, record, you know, this multi-year, multi-generational effort? Because looking at the videos, I don't see you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in like Ryan's tour of your farm, of Corey's tour of your farm, I don't recall like any notations on any of the tanks. Is
No,
this
I don't put much on the tanks. I
mhm.
put most. I write stuff in books, and I
Okay?
do some small recordings.
Okay.
I'll take the phone and do a little clip, you know, and look at the parameters and stuff, and then I kind of record stuff like that. And then I'm always experimenting. I'm trying different things, and I kill more than I produce sometimes.
Uh,
you know, and it is just the way it is. I used to take better records, but after a while, you just it's one of those things, talent built over time. I was able to I can look at a fish and then do a bit of research on it and say, okay, this is this type of fish, da, 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 and comes from this area, blah, blah, blah. And then I say, okay, it's going to need this type of temperature, breeds at this time of year, blah. And then I just go with that, right? It's like, for example, a lot of people ask me, how do cardinal tetras, right? So they keep thinking it's like breeding neon, but it is not. It's a completely different fish. It doesn't breed the same. It doesn't breed at the same time of the day. It doesn't use the same temperature. Like if I just give you the basic parameters, neon's a pair spawner, cardinal's a group spawner. So cardinals will not breed as pairs. They will, but it's not, doesn't do great, but they'll breed as a group. Neon tetras need a brush. Cardinals do not. Cardinals will breed in the open water. Cardinals.
And by brush, because my understanding of neons and what I've seen is they'll put pairs in like the little trays at the farms with like some Java moss or something. Is that what you refer to as?
They need the moss to make sure that the eggs are hidden. Cardinals don't do that. Cardinals will breed in the open water, but you got to realize open water for them is black.
Right.
And the eggs just go to the bottom. And the area where these cardinals live, there's nothing else that lives there. When they're in breeding season, there's not many fish that breed that do and thrive in pH of 4 and dark water and no oxygen. Do well. They're not going to breed in clear, pristine, crystal clear water. And they don't breed that. They breed in the dark. And then they breed. The other thing too is the cardinals will breed first light, and neon breed at dusk.
Interesting.
So they're two different times of breeding. They don't breed in the same water. The neon likes cooler water. Cardinals like it a little warmer. So there's a lot of things like that make, but it took years, right? It's not like I figured this stuff up overnight. Cardinal took me 3 to 4 years to figure that one out. And then there's the hatching, and then there's what do you feed them, and how do you keep them, and what are the diseases that are going to be prone at different stage of their lives. And there's all these things that are adaptable to all the fish that you're breeding, right? You're going to realize that some Central Americans are going to be very susceptible to hex and internal parasites because they come from really clean rivers, lots of current, and then we are out there trying to breed them in a pond or in a tank that we don't change the water much, only when they're breeding. And so there's a lot of stress affected on these fish that are done from aquaculture, from the hobby itself. So you got to take all these things in consideration when you're trying to produce something. And commercial level, you have to say, okay, when I breed this fish, they're going to need to eat this, and then they're going to eat this, and then the filtration is going to change, and then the water changes are going to be more dominant, and food's going to change. There's all kinds of parameters and things that you're going to see, and diseases too, right? There's a density issue. So if you put the fish in too high densities, you're going to have all kinds of little parasites that may show up, or bacteria infections, and so all this is part of the process, and you have to know how to manage this stuff or prevent it is the best thing. So not just keep throwing medication on them. They realize that these fish at a certain age produce more hormones, and then they'll stunt the growth of their brothers and sisters, and so you got to do more water changes. So there's all kinds of things that over time you learn. And some fish are easier, and some fish are a lot harder.
So one of the things that I like to do to, just see if there's anybody in academia that I might want to interview for this podcast is for Google Scholar or scholar.google.com. I've got a few different alerts for various topics, and then every day I get a daily email of recent white papers or research papers or whatever it may be in academia that are being published for those keywords. Like, tropical fish is one of them, discus, Corydora. Like there's various things that I've got searched for. Do you do any of that? Is there anybody in academia, like in the aquaculture world, that you continually talk to? Are you looking for like recent articles on any of these fish that you might be interested in?
I look at a little bit of stuff from the Fish Lab in Ruskin. They got some publication, but the thing is, most of the time the research is very specific to a specific item that is going to be needed for high volume, right? So Petco, PetSmart, Pet Supermarket, Walmart, that kind of stuff. So because they're $1 million of fish, or they're big industries, right? So most of those projects are going to be on those level. They do a lot of research on other fish, but if the fish doesn't have a market, then the projects gets canned, right? So I mean, that was a good one. That was they did research on, for example, hatchet fish. So they were doing hatchet fish, figure out how to breed it, and they get it all figured out. But then what happened is that there was no market for the fish, right?
Hmm.
At high volume, there's a market for it, but there's not the Petco or one of these big guys was gonna do it, and then they decided to can it. So most of these farmers that were going to do it decided, well, I'm not doing it, So you get a bit of data out of these research projects, but you don't get all of it, right? You don't get the long term research. You just get the data. Okay, we know how to breed it, and then that's about it. So after that, how do you grow it? What's the best food? What's the best temperature? What are they going to be prone to in diseases and blah blah blah? What's the best way to ship them and pack them and all that kind of stuff. So me, I'm more into the whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really look as much data as I should, but I got the basics, right? And if I need something, I'll ask them. Most of the time, if I use the lab for research, it's basically say, okay, these fish are dying, or there's a problem here. Do me a test, or do me a sensitivity test for bacteria, or check what's the gut content, and I'll give them the samples, and they'll go through it and tell me what they find.
Mm-hmm.
Their opinion, not mine, right? So there's things like that. I tend to use some stuff like that, but overall, I try to do stuff myself. Trying to figure it out on my own, and then and if I have questions and stuff, I'll do it. But it's kind of hard, right? I've had these labs tell me they've done clown loaches. I get the data, I get the stuff, and I can't do it, right? And for years, I'm trying to use what they're using, and it's not working, right? So their system was different. They had whatever they were doing was working. I mean, it was partially working, but it wasn't really working. And then suddenly I had to say, okay, scratch that, start all over. Let's do my way. And so that's what I did, right? And then you can take their word for it. Yeah, it worked for them, their way and their water and whatever they were doing, but it wasn't working for me, right? And they didn't have enough data. They didn't have the data on conditioning. They didn't have this. They didn't have that. So it was hard for me to just say, okay, what am I doing wrong? It's not like what am I doing wrong. I started wrong. I said I have to go back to observation, checking up, sampling, and then just sit there and have the fish in the house all day and look at them for a year and see what's going on.
That seems like it puts the research and the science in a tough spot, because the whole point of, publishing a paper on something is that, you share all the data points, and so somebody else should be able to replicate if they follow your procedures and have your same parameters.
Oh, yeah,
But when you
absolutely.
but when you
Oh,
throw in
sure.
this
For sure. I
element.
could breed loaches now anywhere in the
Uh-huh.
country. I'm worried about that. Now I've got all that. I've got all I need to know.
But
Right?
for them though, like, they produced a paper that, even following their instructions, this element of a live animal, and if somebody else can't replicate it, it kind of,
Right.
like, it makes it a tough area to do research in and publish it. And
Yeah, it's very hard. It's very
yeah.
hard. There's a lot of things that they do a certain way, but the thing that I'm going to tell you that in order to be in this hobby or anything in life, you got to have that passion, the
Mm-hmm.
passion of enjoying the moment, right? Not necessarily the passion to make dollars. No, the passion of saying, "Oh, check that out! Look at how this fish is doing the stuff," and don't have to really take a video of it. Just enjoying the moment and have passion of nature or whatever your passion is. It doesn't matter if it's music or sports or whatever. The thing is, and that's what I see the problem sometimes in academics is that they do it for a purpose, but they don't have the passion behind it. So they miss the intricacies of the behavior, the little tweaks and things, and where was the fish breeding, at what time of the day, and was there other fish in there? Was there a different plant in there? All these little things that they don't pay attention to, right? They just look at the data, but they don't look at the whole picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can learn a lot from just observing, not necessarily reading. You can read stuff, but then you got to go out there in the field and check them out. Like one of the goals I'd like to see is I'd like to go and Borneo, hopefully one day, and spend a year there or 6 months in the breeding season and see really what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
What's the environment, what's this, what's that, what's going on over there.
Mm-hmm.
Not just go there for a weekend and say, hey, look, no, it's just go there and experience, the environment, everything that's happening over there,
Yeah.
and it's not easy, but that's how you learn, right? That's how you learn. Most of these guys that do research with monkeys and apes and stuff, they're not sitting there like, okay, I was there for a day, I'm going to leave now. No, they're out there in the forest for 2 years.
Didn't Goodall live out there for just decades on end with the gorillas? Wasn't that what she did?
Yeah, exactly. So they get to know what's going on, right? They get to
Mm-hmm.
know all kinds of stuff. That it's Yeah, you could write all this stuff down, do some research, but you got to be, you got to be organized.
Yeah,
So,
no, that's yeah, for sure, for
but
sure.
not just breed a fish to breed a fish, and figure out why it's like that. Why is it doing this? What's the, all these little details that a lot of that stuff, like I say, it's passion, and a lot of the hobbyists have passion, right? They want to take care of their fish. It's their little babies, and they're proud of their setup, and they're proud of how they do stuff, and their lighting and their plants and the way they decor the decorations, and so there's passion there, and then you got to apply it in the breeding. I'm not very good at decorating tanks. I'm not. I try. It's not really what I'm into. I'm into like the behaviors and the breeding, and trying to get something going, right?
Uh-huh.
So, like I say, and I'm not even very good at the computers. I don't really care about, all the stuff for multimedias or, social media, all that stuff. I'm not even into that, I don't really want to be famous. I don't really care, I just like to do my stuff. And if I can, help the quality of life that I'm doing get better for me and my kids, then, then
Mhm.
so be it.
Has there been a fish that you have had a passion for that you want to work with and breed, but you didn't because there was no market outlet for it? Or were you just like, you know what, I'm just going to work with this thing. I work with whatever I want to work with.
I don't think that I do something for the market. I do something because I like it, right?
Hmm.
There's a couple of fish I always wanted to do and I never got around to. And
Well, I guess let me rephrase that. Not so much for the market, but the fact that if you're going to spawn, 100, 200, 300 fish, knowing that they're going to have a home, or you were just like, you know what, I'll just keep them all here at the farm. More so that sense as opposed to like trying to make money off of it.
uh, I'll give them away if I have to,
Okay.
I mean, I'm not really, but I'd say the number one fish that I'd like to work with that I haven't never had a chance with would be archer fish.
Mm.
I had them as a kid. I always had them here. I like the fish, but it's a transitional fish, so it's going to have to be in fresh water and then brackish and then salt water, and so it's going to be a tough conditioning thing. It's going to be tough.
And is it any of the archer fish, or because is even the truly freshwater one? Does that one also have a brackish period?
Yeah, they're all brackish. Yeah,
Okay.
they're all brackish. It's a bit like a lot of the snails, like or the gobies. Like if you go to the gobies, a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
gobies they're extremely prolific, but they have to go through. They breed in fresh water, but the eggs are scattered, and they go down the river, and within 24 hours or 48 hours, they're in the ocean.
Their larval stage is in the ocean, right?
Yeah, literally, they hatch in the ocean, and then they have to settle. They go through the settling phase where they hatch in the ocean, and then they have to metamorphose into a bottom fish, and then that happens in the ocean. And then they migrate back up. They smell the fresh water, and then they move back up in the river, and then they grow in the fresh water. And the reason they do that is probably for predatory reasons. They don't want to get eaten, so they eliminate a lot of the predators that would be after them. So and then it's a secluded, specific area, so they don't have to compete with other fish,
Mm-hmm.
for so. But anyways, the thing with these gobies is that there's a huge market for them, and but I wouldn't necessarily do it for the market. I just do it for the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out how am I going to do this fish? They breed, and then I gotta. It's a bit like the another one that's popular is your Amano shrimp. Amano
Mm-hmm.
shrimp.
Yep.
Yeah. So they're not hard to breed. They breed them in fresh water, but there's a whole trick where you really have to put them in salt water. Let's say a few days, and then you have to and it's got to be pure salt water, like 35 parts, whatever. And then they settle. They're a pelagic stage, and then they settle to the bottom. And as soon as they're on the bottom, it takes 30 days if I remember. And then you can move them back into fresh water, or slowly dilute the water and turn them to fresh water, and then they grow in fresh water. But you cannot get around that stage. So those are challenging processes. That it's not easy. To go fresh to salt to back to fresh,
So do
So
we have any domestic production here in the States of Amana, or are those coming all
I did
from
I did it
farms?
for a while. I
Oh,
did a
okay.
little bit of it. I kind of stopped. It was too tricky and too. It's just I did it for fun, and I sell them here and there, but I kind of don't have them right now. And then it's not a hard one to do. It's just it's tricky, and there's a timing issue.
Mm-hmm.
So you just gotta sit there, and so you have to have the way I do a lot of these things. If I wanted to try it that way, is I have a system with two sumps. So I have a sump that's salt water and a sump that's fresh water. And then, so when I slowly turn the fresh into salt, I turn the saltwater system on
Mm,
and slowly dilute the system,
mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. And then I do the same with the reverse in saltwater. And then
Wow.
the loaches is the same way. The loaches the same way is because the loaches, if we want to talk about clown loaches, they need two waters. They have a conditioning water and they have a hatching water. And those are two different waters. So,
Well, let's do this. Because kind of doing an overview of your website. A lot of prominence to clown loaches, prominence to some synodontis. We see angelfish that pop up on there. You've got your Central American cichlids. So kind of launching into clown loaches. I guess at what point in your fish farm journey, your fish farm business, did you decide to tackle clown loaches? How long ago was that, and kind of what was that decision like?
I'd say it's almost 14 years ago. So, I always liked the fish. I always liked the behavior. I liked the fish. I never really knew it was in such a big demand. I saw them all the time, when the distributors and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But I never really knew there was a big demand, and I thought that was just another fish, right? And it's later on I realized that there's no production of that fish. It's very little. I don't even know anybody. I've talked to a few guys in Czech, and I got a good buddies in Czech, and they barely have a hard time doing them over there. And then I know some guys in Asia that are playing with it too. But like again, it's not. There's not. It's not like they. I couldn't name you three places that I know have done it.
Well, the internet would tell you that to breed clown loaches, and this is before Corey kind of brought you into I would say fish nerd prominence of displaying your farm and showing what you're doing. That before that, it was like, oh yeah, if you want to breed clown loaches, you have to do hormones. Like that's how they do it. And that
Well,
and
hormones.
it stops at that
Yeah,
statement. It
but,
like nobody goes
yeah, but
any deeper than that. It's like, oh, just hormones. Okay, I have no
yeah,
idea what that
it's not
means,
hard.
but
Hormone there's a big misconception of hormones. Okay, hormone it doesn't do anything really. If your fish doesn't have eggs and it's not conditioning, you're not going to do anything.
mm-hmm,
So hormone is no different than a water change or basically the light cycle or whatever. It's just a push over the hill to help the fish breed. That's it. But the thing with the hormone and clown loaches is a tough one because if you're using hormone on the loaches and you don't do it at the right time, you're killing the fish.
oh wow,
So you can't. You're growing the fish for 3 years, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to do them, and then you stick them, and then they're all dead. And then what? Where are you at? You're nowhere. So it's more than that. Now, hormone is one thing, but hormone is not. Everybody thinks hormone, but I can give you all the hormone in the world and give you all the fish you want. And if you can't condition your fish and if you can't get your fish ready, hormone's not going to do anything.
mm-hmm,
It's going to be a waste of time. So hormone is basically the trigger. Everybody, oh, hormone, yeah. You know, there's so many times where I hear people telling me, oh yeah, just always use hormones. Like, okay, here's the hormone, here's the fish, breed it. Go ahead.
Well, where are we getting these is it like you're going down your local tractor feed supply and you're saying, "Hey, give me some of that hormone off the shelf," Like how does that?
No, but basically, it's a the main hormone in the industry is Ovaprim, which is a synthetic hormone, but it's based out of salmon.
Mhm.
It's made to breed salmon and trout, and catfish and things like that. And so it's a high volume thing, but it don't need a lot. I mean, well, for a salmon, you need a jar. So every time you do an injection in a salmon, it's probably going to cost you $100. But
Wow.
yeah, because you got meat.
Yeah.
But the hormone is a very misconception. A lot of people just say, oh, you're cheating. Not really. You actually need it to get going. And then when you use it, then you're like, oh, that's the trigger. Then I don't need it anymore, right? You have to figure out really what you need to do to get the fish to go, right?
Mhm.
And I would rather use hormones than see a fish go extinct.
Mm. Yeah,
you know,
I could definitely see that for sure.
or being exploited and there's nothing left, and that's what happens to places like Brazil and Southeast Asia. Some of these fish are just not going to be around
Hmm.
much longer. Not necessarily from the over harvesting, it's just from destruction of habitats.
Well, we have our own fisheries practice in the United States where when we catch salmon, like they literally kill the females to get the eggs, and then they get the males, and then they express on the male's body to get the their
Right,
sperm out. Like so, we're actually sacrificing the salmon fish before they get to their native spawning point, so that we can ensure that their survivability continues.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's there's a lot of people on the planet, man.
No, for
We
sure.
we need to consume, and people want wild salmon, but there's not much wild salmon left. I
Hmm.
hate to tell you, but there's not. It's just there's so many countries out there harvesting the stuff, and it's just even in
You
in
know,
the tropics.
we could do that tangent too, and just think about how popular sushi's become in the United States and
Oh
globally,
yeah,
and that pressure on wild caught tuna. And then
yeah,
I really like hearing the stories of how there's some innovation with biodomes and nets out in the Pacific of them trying to basically farm raise these tuna, but in environments where when they farm raise salmon, they're doing it in pens, and I know they do this in Puget Sound area, but they're still very much in like smaller waterways. So there's a lot of concern of waste, and they're doing Atlantic salmon in a Pacific salmon kind of habitat. So we had one a couple
yeah,
years ago where there was a major pen collapse, and all these Atlantic salmon
yeah.
basically escaped. So at least with the tuna pens, they're so far out in the ocean that like okay, the tuna are gonna poop and pee out there, but like it's just like the ultimate water change of the ocean, so it's
Right,
not like in this small estuary or this small river system. But I do
right.
like I really like hearing the stories of the innovation that they're trying to farm raise tuna, for lack of a better word or term.
Yeah, but that's just tuna is pretty much a tragedy of the ocean in the sense it's the most harvested fish
Mhm.
on the planet. And I had a friend of mine that did 20 years of research on tuna, and his name's Tim Sipple. Anyways, he worked on did his master's and PhD on salmon research and tuna research, and most of his stuff on Oakland and New Zealand. And he said there's no hope for the fish, because it takes too long to grow. It's a very specific fish. It's we're going to do what we can to manage the fisheries, but even managing the fisheries is impossible because you got countries that do whatever they want to do.
Right.
And then one of the data that was really sad in the salmon and the tuna was the size of the fish 40 years ago and the size of the fish now. So 40 years ago, a tuna was 1,200 pounds. Now it's 300. So what happened is just, well, they don't let them grow. They don't let them grow. And then so they harvest everything they can,
Mhm.
It's become so specific on you get these boats out there that they go out there with their helicopters and drone, and
Yep.
then
Yep.
they'll scan the pod and say, okay, that pod's not worth enough money. We're gonna wait for the next one, and then they're gonna say, and then as soon as they find one, they just catch everything. And then they have the issue with the dolphins and the turtles and stuff because the dolphins are on top and the tunas are underneath, and they work together as a group to hunt. And tuna travel the planet. They don't just sit in one spot. They're going wherever the prey is. And
Mhm.
so, if they go in front of a country that that needs the food, they're going to be all gone. And then they take them all. So aquaculture is it's a very early stage for tuna, and
Mhm.
it's not possible to produce the fish needed for the consumer.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
Well,
They're not.
the operation to do so, when I lived in San Diego, we fished a tuna pin, and what I mean by that is you basically hop in your boat and you go 4 hours down into like the Mexican waters, and they have these massive pens that they pull with what look like fishing trawling boats, and they kind of pull them through the ocean, and that's where the tuna are. You're not
Right,
fishing for those tuna, you're fishing for all the wild tuna that are around the pin, because it's essentially like a giant kelp patty. And when you fish for
right,
those kinds of fish, the kelp patties, I think the logic is the kelp patties have, if I remember, the small fish, and then that's where kind of the tunas and your yellowtails and all those guys, you find the kelp patty, you'll basically find the fish. And so this tuna pin
right.
represents a giant kelp patty essentially. And I just remember like it was large, but we'd have to have like tens of thousands of these things out in the water to even make a dent in probably just like sushi consumption alone for, the Southern California region, like it just,
I don't know.
the scale of
We're
it's not
way
there.
behind. We're way behind. I mean, it's same with the loaches right now. If you look at the loaches, the price on Clown Loaches wild caught has been skyrocketing because there's less and less out of the
Hmm.
wild, and the mortality is so high. It's so high. I mean, the majority of these Clown Loaches is 50% loss. Just from landing. So you bring in 2,000, you're guaranteed you're going to lose 1,000. And that's just no. But I don't know what the numbers are now in collecting. I know that in the past, the Clown Loach collection was probably between 50 and 60 million in a year, and now it's probably 10 million.
Wow.
Maybe. And then you get whatever's left over. So there's not much, and that's why loaches right now they're still available, but they're in rough shape. They're in
Hmm.
rough shape.
Do they also face just land development issues over in, because it's Borneo and Sumatra?
Yeah, well, they come from Java, Sumatra, and Borneo, but the thing is, most of these places are overpopulated, and there's nothing left.
Hmm.
Borneo was the one that got hit the worst. That was the main island, but the problem now is that China's into that island because the governments aren't stable there. There's no government really, so they go in. China goes in and takes everything. And it's very big. Borneo is very big for the rare metals, so China needs all that for their electronics. So they're just raping the environment. They cut the trees, they rape the land, and whatever's left is, it's not good. So I know people have been there about 2 or 3 years ago and to look for loaches, and then those habitats are gone. There's hundreds of square miles of rivers that are completely decimated. And so they try to put loaches in other countries other countries with rivers and stuff and see if they can take off, but it hasn't worked. So because there's such a demand for it, but if the habitat in Borneo is gone and the Sumatra and Java are overdeveloped, there's no hope for that fish because it's too specific. And the breeding is so specific that it doesn't take much to tweak it and to make sure that fish will not reproduce. It doesn't take much.
Hmm. So let's go back to your experience then with the Clown Loaches.
Experience. Okay,
Your
so
vast experience.
well, I don't know everything. I got my own little knowledge of the way the fish are, and I mean I don't even know which strain I have because there's technically three strains. There's a Java strain, a Borneo strain, and a Sumatra strain. So I don't even know what strain I have. Because it's from one collector that I got a long time ago, and I don't even have the wild ones anymore. Those are long gone. So I've just been breeding. The ones that are breeding now are F2s and F3s. So I'm doing that now. That's where I get a lot of eyeball patterns. I could just tell you that the biggest thing with loaches is that the conditioning part. They could be really fat. They could be really good looking, and you think they're going to breed, and nothing's ready. And it's one of those things like I told you earlier that yeah, I can only breed that fish. Technically in the wild, it'll breed twice a year. But for me, I've never been able, maybe twice, maybe 3 times in 14, breeded twice in a season, in a year. So most of the time I breed them once a year. And when I breed them, it's always the same. Doesn't matter what, it's Halloween. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound great again.
Using my phone this time.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, we had a solid like 50 minutes of like real good audio quality. Then all of a sudden we started talking about Clown Loaches and then all sorts of distortion and stuff. So I guess the internet gods got mad at us for taking up so much bandwidth.
That's all right. No, I mean, I don't know where I was at, but basically, like every fish is a little different, and Clown Loaches is just a hard one because it requires certain parameters and that are hard to achieve in the aquarium. You need the two different waters, so conditioning water and a breeding water, and then
And can you break that down for me? Like, what's the difference? Like, what would define a conditioning water versus a breeding water?
well, one of them is basically regular, like so. I can give you the parameters. Clown Loach water would be for conditioning would be between 7.5 and 8.5. That would be good conditioning water. pH wise, connectivity probably regular I would say probably, I don't know, between 400, 500, 500 microsiemens to 600 microsiemens is fine.
Mm-hmm.
And our TDS would be, I don't know what TDS is, probably right around the 100 or 150 or something like that. So, but the hatching water has to be really soft, and then acidic. So, but you can't condition the clown loach in acidic water. The eggs will only hatch in acidic water, but they're not going to, but you can't hatch the eggs in alkaline water. So it's what I mean. It's two different waters.
Is
So
is some of the science behind that, the biology behind that, so that the more acidic water helps the actual fry to kind of break through the egg?
yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah, that, and then the eggs won't hatch if the water is hard and like alkaline pH. The eggs won't hatch, or then they'll die. And
Mm-hmm.
the other thing too is if the water is too high in minerals, the fish don't break through the egg, and when they do break through the egg, they get their nose broken.
Right.
So you have
Right.
thousands of loaches with crooked faces, and it's like, oh,
Mm.
great. So yeah, all these little things that take in advance. Give me a second. I gotta deal with someone's coming over.
Yeah. Sure thing.
2 seconds.
Hey, Andres. Oh, we got
How's it going,
we got some video. There we go. Man, good thing I wasn't picking my nose.
Oh, that's all right, man. I just figured I'd call you. I'm outside and just doing my stuff. I just a little client came over from Tampa, just picking up a couple of bags of stuff that was already done.
Nice. Well, I think what we can
Just,
do is we can kind of finish up the clown loach talk, and then I do want to give people kind of us to talk about bioaquatics real quick, kind of give you a shout out on that front. Maybe kind of hear the kind of the status of fish availability, and then I think we can wrap this up so you can get back to your busy day. But I mean, there's so much stuff that we haven't even talked about that I got to have you back on a second time, because I know just like
well, I don't
you're.
want to take all your time, man. I don't
No,
want to take all your time.
hey, no, not at all, man.
Popular guy like you, with fame and all
Hardly,
that.
hardly.
I'm just a little guy in a whatever in Florida in a little quiet place.
I love it, man. I love it. So yeah, so your clown loaches. We were talking about kind of the breeding water versus or conditioning water versus the hatching water, and just what happens with too many minerals when the water's too alkaline to the fry and kind of coming out of the eggs. So
Right.
it,
Well, you got to look at it that way. So my biggest example for clown loaches would be like salmon, right? So the salmon lives in the ocean, and then in the breeding season, it goes up the rivers,
mm-hmm.
right? And then lays the eggs and then migrates back down, So that's the way I look at loaches. I look at loaches living in big rivers, massive rivers, but in the rainy season, twice a year, big rains, they go up the streams and they breed. That's how they do it. And then the little ones, they'll I don't know how far up they go up the streams to breed, but it literally has to be small streams, So it would be very interesting and very cool to have cameras out there and videotape these fish up in the streams, up the rivers and up the the creeks, and and then because the hatch, they hatch in 24 hours, and then you can put them right away into the hard water. Within, I'd say 2 or 3 days, they're in hard water and they're fine. But the hatching has to be done in soft water, so that tells me that fish has to be migrating up a stream somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I say, it would be good to go to Borneo, set up these cameras underwater at a certain time of the year when the rain shows up, and have these big clown loaches come up and do their thing.
Mm-hmm.
Egg scatterers, they don't take care of the young. I had a lot of discussion with people say, oh yeah, but they should be taking care of their young. I says, no, they just breed and then they leave,
Mm-hmm.
And the fish produce it's a really interesting fish for aquaculture, because a female can produce so many eggs. So just as an example, on average, you have, if you take volume wise, a milliliter of clown loach eggs is 1,200 eggs. So for every milliliter that she can excrete, she's doing 1,200 eggs. So, but
Wow.
most of the females I do 20 mils.
Wow.
So you get an understanding the
Wow.
volume. So
a fish can produce 10 to 20,000 babies, well, eggs. I'm not saying they're all going to hatch,
Sure.
but they're massive. And then so I've had females here that are like 8 to 10 inches produce me 50 mils.
And so
So
you're stripping, you're doing the stripping of the eggs, right?
you
And
could do both. You could do both. I've had it naturally way right now.
mm-hmm.
The thing is, it's kind of you have to do both sometime, because the thing is they need to get rid of the eggs. If not, it's so much, how do you say, organic material that the fish gets sick if they don't excrete it.
Well, it's like egg bound, right? Isn't egg bound?
Yeah, egg bound is a good way to do it, but it just needs to go.
Right.
And so the male will, more than one male, will chase a female around and squeeze her. Go again and again and again and really hammer it down until she's nothing left, and that's how it's done. And then the eggs are just they're buoyant, really buoyant. I mean, and then they go into the water column and they just go down the stream, and and then as soon as they hatch, they go straight to the bottom. They go straight to the ground. They don't sit there, and they go straight down and they stay there. The fish will hover like a goby. It will not leave the ground for at least, I'd say, 3 weeks. So for 2 to 3 weeks, the fish is on the bottom in the rocks hiding. You're not going to see it, and it's literally transparent with little black stripes. So if there's any kind of gravel in there, you're not going to see it. It's just going to sit there, and it doesn't move. It only moves when it's looking for food. So it's kind of hot. It just goes a little jerking motions.
So going back to the boys, and I'm so sorry, but for the males, are you expressing them as well to get their, was it the milt out, and then you mix it?
No, the males is, I use the males as an indicator. So I will check the males regularly to see how much they're flowing, and if the flowing is doing really, really well, then I might start, triggering the soft water and all that kind of stuff. But the males is the indicator, and the males, after a while, they get really colorful, really bright red fins, and really ornery. When they're getting ready to breed. They start fighting on each other, and their spines come out, and blah, blah, blah. And then that's when I start doing the water changes and start changing the soft water, So those are the things that, I try to use, and it's got like I told you, there's 2 different systems, and it's water, hard water, and the same system of water, and the same, so I've got 2 drains on the tank, and got 2 flows, so, and then until I tweak it, and then I make sure the temperature's right, and, lighting and all that stuff, and they breed first light.
And then what are some of your first foods for those fry that are just, hanging out at the very, very bottom of the gravel, kind of in the rocks? Like how are we getting food to them?
Most of the time I don't do anything. I won't feed for a week. They'll just eat the
microorganisms. Yeah.
The biofilm, because there's a lot of organics in there. And they go straight to brine shrimp.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Same with cardinals. Cardinals the same thing. I go straight to brine shrimp.
Okay.
I've never done. I've tried rotifers and stuff like that. It's just more work than it's worth it. So if the conditions are right and you raise the fish right, brine shrimp is a perfect food for cardinals or neons or clown loaches.
That makes life so much easier that you don't have to mess with any of those microfoods or cultures yourself.
Yeah, in the beginning, these fish are so small, and you think they're never going to eat it. But you got to realize that, like, for example, the cardinals, I don't feed the cardinals for 10 days.
Wow.
7 to 10 days, they're not getting any food, and they just sit there and grow. And then they're quiet in a little dark tank. And then suddenly, about day 7 or 8, I start putting brine shrimp in there, and they'll eat it. And then as soon as they eat one, they're good, and they're good to go. I produce thousands and thousands of cardinals that way. But the condition have to be right? The grow out and the clean water and all that, because if the water's not right, they're not going to grow well, and they're going to be too small, and then they're not going to eat the brine shrimp. So a lot of that stuff is making sure that all the steps are there and the growth is there. Because I've had clown loaches where I messed up the hatching water. They hatched, but they just stunted, and I never was able to eat brine shrimp. And then you're screwed. Then you can do microworms. That works really well for loaches. Because the microworms will lay at the bottom.
Right.
Rotifers doesn't work well for clown loaches because they're no water column, and the babies are at the bottom. So it has to be something that said. The brine shrimp works because after a while it just goes to the bottom.
Yep.
They find it.
No, that's
So
fantastic.
that's how it is. But it's still, it's still a tweaking. The problem I have with the loaches is conditioning again. It's to make sure that the females are ready at the right time. And as many summers or many years I've messed it up. I mean, something happened, water got too cold or got too hot, and the whole conditioning went down the toilet and got nothing for a year or
God,
2 years.
I mean, that is nuts. Like you miss your one window. You miss that Halloween window, and it's, well, I'll see you next year, guys, kind of thing. That's something else.
Exactly.
How long did it take you before? So 14 years ago, you got into Clown Loaches. How many years before you had your first successful spawn?
I got a spawn pretty much the second year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and but it was really hard for me to replicate because I wasn't taking notes. I was like, oh, let's do this, and then the fish are ready, and I did something, and it worked, and I was like, what the hell did I do? And then it was a temperature issue, it was a food conditioning, whatever, I couldn't remember, and then I had a hard time after that. I was like, okay, I remember, yeah, because you're not paying attention to everything, you're not taking records, and then I think it was the second or third year I just did really well, and then after that it was on and off, and I had to tweak out the stuff.
Yeah. Well, Andres, you are a busy man, and I've had you for over an hour of time. So let's wrap this up with kind of talking just a little bit about bioaquatics. So one, I love your ultra simple logo. Of I don't know where did your logo come from?
It was my brother and I were having lunch somewhere, I can't remember, and on a paper towel, he's like, "Oh, look, how about this logo?" And I was like, "Okay."
It's like it's the goofiest, silly, simple logo, but I love it. Like it's just like this green kind of loachy guy, but
I know, I know.
it's just goofy, but it's awesome though. I love it. So your
Just a simple, I didn't want to be.
It's like genius though. I really like it. So bioaquatics.com. I'll have links to your website in the show notes for people. I definitely think that in the next couple months, if you'll have me, I'd love to have you back on. And
Oh yeah,
because I mean,
just let me know.
just going through all the different fish that you have to offer. These clown loaches that you breed, you do have them available for sale. You sell the oddballs as well. Right now, and I would have to imagine, with all the people that got into the hobby, you've probably seen a bit of an uptick. So you've got still some decent availability of your species as I kind of look through it.
Yeah, I need to do the inventory again, and I got all kinds of stuff out there.
Because I know there's something about that Honduran red point cichlid or convict that you have that I just want to work with that guy. That guy looks like such a cool fish. So,
No, it's more of like a Sahika type fish, It's not really a convict, I don't believe, because it's not aggressive. It's not an aggressive fish.
Yeah, and that's super awesome. It's beautiful. Yeah, and I mean you've got Neolamprologus multifasciatus. I mean you've got geos. You've got a ton angels. So many different fish to talk about on here. But I think maybe we'll save that for next time. But I would say in the
Yeah, that's no
meantime.
problem. Like I see, I'm breeding stuff, and sometimes I'm out, and I started breeding catfish again because it was too hot this summer. I couldn't breed the numbers that I wanted to do, and then I got back into it. And there's a lot of stuff. It's still a hobbyist for me, but it takes me time to get my inventory up and decide what to breed. It's like I don't really follow the market, I just say, okay, I'm going to breed this, I'm going to breed that, and then see what happens. Everything I produce sells one way or another.
Right.
And then give me a second here. Give me a second. Tumai, come on. Go.
It's all right. I've had barking dogs in a couple interviews. It's okay.
Okay. Yeah, no, I got some people here that just showed up, so I got to deal with that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, no, like I say, we can. If you give me 5 minutes again, I'll deal with these guys. I don't know.
I'll let you go, Andres. I've had you for long enough, man. I want to. You're such a busy guy, and I think people having.
The website, it is what it is. I'm trying to work on it, and but it's not easy, and because it's another world for me. The world of the internet is different, and then deal with people and how to promote stuff. And it's so much to be done. I'd like to do videos, and I've tried, but I'm not very good at it. And so one day we'll put it all together.
Well, hey,
You need to come
in the
over here.
meantime, I'll be one of your outlets. So we'll have you pop on every couple months, and because I think people are gonna love this episode. I know I'm enjoying the crap out of talking with you, and I can't wait to talk with you again and deep dive into some other of these fish that you work with and your experience.
Right.
So Andres,
Exactly.
I'm gonna let you go, man. You are awesome. I know people are gonna love this. They're gonna head over to your website, and hopefully they swoop up some fish, or maybe if you do an update on inventory, they'll pick up some of those oddball clown loaches you might have or whatnot. But
Yeah.
definitely awesome talk with you, Andres, man. You have a
Well, it's awesome to talk to you.
thank you.
Thank you for listening.
No, man, this is the perfect kind of episode where you go, you share your experience, you share all of the knowledge that you have on any given topic. I mean, we talked from clown loaches to clams to your time
Right.
breeding sticklebacks in Canada. I mean, that's 3 C's right there, right? That's perfect. All right, Andres, you have a good rest of your day, man. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. And we'll talk. And yeah, call me. We'll figure it out a day, and we'll figure it out. And then we'll talk more about mosses too.
There you go. There you go. Take care now.